Welcome to Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave, where we're on a journey to answer 4 questions from some of the best leaders and leadership minds in the country. And today we are pleased to have a special guest, Ron Price. So Ron, tell us a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself, kind of a bit of your background, who you are, what do you do?
Well, first of all, I'm really grateful to be married to Pam. We've been together almost 49 years. We have 6 grown children, almost 12 grandchildren. We're expecting the 12th one in November. That's probably
Congratulations.
most important. But I've had a wonderful, wonderful career, Dr. Dave, learning about leadership and getting opportunities to lead in different organizations. Anything from more blue collar manufacturing kind of facilities to working in the nonprofit world, to working in an international nutrition business for 15 years, to now having the privilege of serving as the president of TTI Success Insights, which is a company that's really dedicated to helping people have transformative experiences that really help them see themselves in a fresh way with greater confidence, to see others in a fresh way, and to build more success and more fulfilling relationships in the process.
Nice. Well, I know you had your own business for a number of years. So speaking about the background, tell us a little bit about that and then kind of how that made an easy transition to what you're doing now with TTI and how that really helps organizations.
Sure. In 2000, I retired from running an international nutrition business. It'd been a wonderful experience, but I felt it was time for me to do something different. So after trying a few different things in 2004, I decided that I would go investigate TTI Success Insights. I went to a conference of theirs in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I liked the people. I thought they were doing something that was admirable. And so I decided to start doing some executive coaching and organizational growth consulting and use the TTI products as a part of that. So these products help people understand their behavioral style, their underlying motivators, how they make judgments, how they make decisions, their skills, their emotional intelligence. I just thought, wow, this is a great toolkit that I can use. And I was fortunate that in building my business, which we called Price Associates, I got involved in between 2004 and 2008 in a lot of fast growth, small to medium sized businesses that were looking for building strong leadership teams, better hiring practices, better communication skills, and things like that. And so the partnership between my business and TTI was wonderful. In 2009, I asked for and was given the opportunity to build the master distributorship for TTI Success Insights in Greater China. So it meant establishing an office in Shanghai. I never lived there, but I commuted a lot. And it was a whole different experience, a different culture. Of course, we had to translate everything into simplified Chinese. And it was just a fantastic experience. I worked in that for 9 years, and then I retired from that in 2018 and sold my share of the business. And then I was really coming out of the pandemic, starting to think about slowing down. We'd had a wonderful run and did a lot of leadership development work. And I was thinking, well, it's getting close to the end of my career. And then Dave Bonstetter, who's the co-founder of TTI, contacted me and asked me if I would think about coming and working at TTI. And we mulled it over for a good 6 months. And then in the fall of 2021, I accepted his invitation. So since then, I've been serving as the president here. And again, it's been a fantastic ride. Lots and lots of opportunity for learning, for growth. I think one of the things that's been so exciting for me is that it continually challenges me and it reminds me I'm not finished. I got a long way to go myself still. And so those challenges, I think, are what give me a lot of energy and keep me going.
Nice. I was going to give you a hard time and say something to the effect of, well, your plan's on slowing down.
My wife says I'm terrible at retiring. Yeah, my wife says I'm terrible at retiring.
Yeah. So you had a couple failed attempts, it sounds like, but
right.
Knowing how much is involved in running that company, I was just saying, your plans on slowing down didn't quite work out as well as you wanted to. But with that, let me jump into the first question. So what does leadership mean to you, and what does good leadership look like?
Well, first of all, that question is simple and yet very complex at the same time. I think that one of the ways I think of what leadership means to me is that it means somebody who influences, somebody who has an impact, somebody, you could say, who moves the needle. And I actually believe that everybody has the opportunity to lead. In other words, everybody has the opportunity to influence or to have an
Absolutely.
impact. And so what is good leadership? Well, I think, and I have been very passionate about this for the last 15 or 20 years. I think good leadership is made up of developing yourself first as a person, and the way that you define your own self, you define your character. So I think it's about how you choose to govern your own behaviors, really your mindset and your behaviors, and then how you choose to relate to other people. I think that's the foundation of good leadership, character. Then on top of that, I think to be a good leader, you have to build expertise. There has to be something that you know and can do that makes a difference for other people, that creates value for other people. And so being a good expert leader means that you have to stay relevant. You have to stay current. You must, in today's world, you have to constantly be learning, or you begin to become obsolete very quickly, because leadership is no longer a static, once you learn it, you've got it kind of a thing. It's very adaptive. It's constantly changing. And if you're going to be a great expert, you have to stay up with the expertise in the field that you're working in. And then the third part of being a good leader, I think, is when you're given opportunities to serve in a more formal way in a position, it's very important to understand that you're a steward of that position. You don't own it. It's something that you've been given for a period of time, but every one of us has to give it back, even if that means when we pass away. So in each of those three areas, your character, your expertise, and then your formal leadership, I think there are very specific ways that you create goodness, that you build a wholeness, or you could say that you build integrity into each of those parts of leadership. That's why I say I think it's kind of a simple question, but a complicated answer. Ultimately, Peter Drucker said that his definition of a leader was somebody who has followers. That if nobody's following you, you might think you're a leader, but you're not. And for me, it's not just that. It's that a lot of times you understand your leadership by looking at who's following you and why they're following. So I know I gave you probably more than you were hoping for.
No, actually, it's we constantly play off of that. And I like the answer, and you're absolutely right. Most of the questions are simple on their face, but really when you look at them a little bit deeper, they're way more complex than what they are surface level. So I wanted to follow up on one thing you mentioned about expertise. And I agree with you 100%. It's hard to go into an industry, be the president of a corporation. Let's just say it's manufacturing, and you knew nothing about manufacturing, but you were very successful in a different industry. It's kind of a two-part question. One, how do you see people trying to make that transition, or can they, or do you feel they can successfully? And the second one is, the higher up you go in the organization, your technical skills, like you may not know every nut bolt of the machine that makes the widgets, but let's say the leader is conversational enough about the topic to be able to at least have a discussion with the frontline staff about exactly what is going on. I recently interviewed manufacturer CEO, and he had mentioned about that expertise level, like still being conversational, but not having to know every nitty gritty detail. Tell me about that. Like I said, two-part, jumping industries, and then the level of expertise you feel you need at that level of your organization compared to the frontline staff.
Yeah, I think it's very, very contextual. And I have a couple of experiences I could draw from. One of my early leadership opportunities as a business owner was that I owned, along with my dad, 4 manufacturing facilities where we retreaded truck tires. Nice. And I learned that from the ground up. I learned it from the simplest jobs. I learned it from sweeping the floor to repairing truck tire tubes to doing every bit of the manufacturing process. And it was really valuable to me because I knew every piece of equipment in our facilities. I knew how it worked. I knew how to tear it down and put it back together. So that's one kind of expertise that you build within the organization. But I can tell you that I had to learn while I was there a lot of the business management principles. I went to business school while I was there, so I had to learn how to manage the finances. I had to learn how to create operating statements and balance sheets and cash flow. We applied for an SBA loan. This is back in the 70s. And in the 70s, we didn't have computers. And so I had to by hand do 5 years of forecasting to submit to the Small Business Administration and hope to get their approval for a loan. And so I had some skills I learned, and I had other skills I had to learn as I went. Now, in contrast to that, my role here at TTI Success Insights, I have more of a general knowledge. I have a lot of experience in the business from the standpoint of being in the field as a coach or a consultant or a facilitator.
Right.
But there's a lot that I didn't understand about what happens inside the business. And today there's still a lot I don't understand about the technology because I've never learned coding. So the key is to have some expertise that's a significant way you can contribute. And in this case, the expertise that I brought here was both my experience in the field where the customers are actually using the products and my general business experience around finance and marketing and strategy and all those kinds of things. But then you've got to be smart enough to understand that you need people much, much smarter than you in every aspect of the business. So even though I understand finance and I've served as a CFO before, we have a CFO here that's much, much smarter than me. Even though I've done a lot of marketing, we have a marketing person that is much smarter than me. And even though I know how to use my computer and send email, we have a lot of technology people that are a lot smarter than me. So I think that when I say it's contextual, I think it really depends on what the organization needs and what you bring to it. And one of the things that I discovered when I came here was that there actually were some areas where I had to develop new expertise because it didn't exist here already. So it's always a balancing act. Where can you bring other experts in? Where can you leverage the expertise that you bring to it? And what new expertise do you have to be developing along the way?
Nice. I was going to ask you about that because originally the way it sounded when you came across was you had to develop new expertise. Like I didn't know about XYZ subject, so I had to learn about it. But then by the time you ended the sentence, it sounded like, oh no, there were some technologies and some discoveries that needed to be brought into TTI that they didn't have here before. So I guess it's a balancing act of there's certain things that you need to learn, like the behind the scenes stuff that you wouldn't have gotten in your business. But also you identified, I'm imagining, some items that say, hey, this would be very useful here that they don't have in place. Let me develop that expertise within here that I already have that I can bring to them. Correct?
Yeah, I think that one of the things about contextual leadership is you need to know yourself well and know where your strengths are. You need to equally know what your limitations are and be ready to not only recognize them yourself, but be transparent about them. Acknowledge them. Let your people know this is an area that I don't think I'm the expert in. And so sometimes we're going to be able to satisfy that internally. Sometimes we'll find somebody from the outside that can help us. And sometimes we just need to dig in and develop new expertise ourselves. Interesting thing, Dave, one of the things that I've written about along lines of leadership is you are what I would call a formal Ph.D. I often talk about how to earn an informal Ph.D. What I mean by that is, what does it take to get your Ph.D.? Well, you study the other thought leaders in your area of interest.
Correct.
And in your early work, you're just quoting them. Your citations are all about them. But then you get to a certain point in your learning where you have to create new knowledge yourself. It's a dissertation. Yes. And you work on developing that new knowledge, and then you submit it to a group of peers, other PhDs, for them to judge. It's called your defense. So they're saying, yes, in fact, you really did establish some new knowledge. You expanded our understanding by the research or the work that you did. Well, why can't we do that informally? So the way that I propose getting an informal PhD is pick the area that you want to develop expertise in. Go identify 3 or 4 or 5 or 7 experts in that area and start following them. Read their books, listen to their podcasts. If you know they're going to be near you, go listen to them speak, read their blog. Just become a stalker of those 3, 4, 5, or 7 people. And if you do that long enough, what ends up happening is you start to stimulate creative thinking yourself. Because you take a little bit from this expert, a little bit from this expert, a little bit from, and before you know it, you've created a new recipe. You've created some new understanding, some new enlightenment about your area of expertise, and you develop that, articulate it, and share it with others to let them validate it for you. And when they say, yes, you really got it, Ron, then I say, you've earned your informal PhD. Now, I think that if you have a strategic learning plan, you could actually earn a new informal PhD every 3 to 5 years.
I would agree with that 100% on both ends of it. One, the time frame, but also picking the thought leaders that you like and like stalking them to the point where, and you're absolutely right. It's you're studying, you're quoting, you're citating, you're doing the citations, and at some point you get filled up enough with it that when you start synthesizing the information, formally or informal, that you don't even realize that, all right, what I'm saying right now is a little bit, 10% this, 5% that, 20% that. And it's just that synthesis of something new across the board, exactly as you mentioned. But you put your own flair, you put your own influence into it, and you've studied it enough, formally or informally, to realize, okay, now it's coming across as me, not just me quoting somebody else and being passing along the information. So I like that idea of the strategic learning plan, but also that every 3 to 5 years, being able to get that informal PhD. I love that idea. I think it's fantastic. And you're 100% spot on with that. That's fantastic. I don't do a lot on Twitter, but there's a gentleman that I do follow that's in the kind of YouTube podcasting space he's very instructional. And he put something in on Twitter the other day about learning and being a lifelong learner and what are the importance of lifelong learning. And as we close out this segment, I'll tell you the quote that I sent him, and never expecting a response because this guy's millions of followers and so on and so forth. When I was in school, I was able to go, very fortunate to be able to go 2 or 3 times over to Oxford to present at a conference over there because they were affiliated with the school that I went to, and was able to go to an offshoot conference of that in Singapore, which was awesome. But coming up with a lot of Oxford, I had like memorabilia and stuff from the bookstore. Of course, we had to spend tons of money at the bookstore. I got this one magnet that you have to. I mean, what? It's not like you're going there every day, Ron.
Yeah.
But I got this magnet on my refrigerator that I just absolutely love. And it has like a picture of one of the gargoyles on the side of the university. And it said, "He who graduates yesterday and stops learning today is uneducated by tomorrow."
Yeah. That is a great quote. And this is the world we live in. Some of us have a natural appetite for it. Others of us have to nurture that, but we all have to keep learning or we're falling behind.
Exactly. Well, I laugh. I tweeted it back to him as a reply to, something about he put in about lifelong learning, and like I said, got a really good response back. Like I said, I wasn't quite expecting it, but that is one of my favorite quotes. We constantly have to be learning, and maybe some of the instinctual folks aren't as keen on it as some of the intellectual folks, but the listeners can go look that up on their own.
So before we go to break, I'll share with you one of my favorite quotes from one of my mentors.
Please do.
Yeah, he said this years ago, and it's always stuck with me. He said, "Ron, you will be the same person 5 years from now as you are today, except for 2 things: the books you read and the people you meet." Now, today we would say the podcast you listen to. There are a lot of other, the books you listen to. But this concept that you are going to be different 5 years from now based on how you invest in your relationships and your learning.
100%. And I mean, and an offshoot of that is you're the sum of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. But yes, that quote you said about the books you read and the people that you hang around, that is absolutely 100% correct. And I love that quote as well. So let's go ahead and wrap up this segment of Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave. We will be back to cover a few more of our questions. So we will see you all in a bit. Welcome back to Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave. We are here with special guest Ron Price, and we just covered the topic of what leadership means and what good leadership looks like. And we talked a little bit about lifelong learning and the importance of that. So with that, I'm going to jump straight into our second question, which is, what is one of the biggest leadership challenges you've had to face?
Oh my goodness. There are quite a few of them. Can I share 2?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So the first one's kind of a funny story. I mentioned that I had taken a leadership role in this nutrition business. This was back back in 1989. And my third day on the job, the FDA came in and shut us down.
Mm.
And it was decided that I was going to speak at a live press conference with all of the local affiliates, ABC, NBC, CBS, at 5 o'clock that afternoon, and respond to the fact that the FDA had just shut us down.
Wow. Merry Christmas on day 3, huh?
Yeah. So I got up in front of all these people live. And of course, I hadn't had any media coaching at that point. And I just was going to say what I thought. That's what you do. So they asked me about it. And I said, well, I'm convinced the FDA is wrong. And we're going to beat them in court. And that was it. That's all I've got to say. Interestingly, what the controversy was around, we were bringing a product in from Japan that's called coenzyme Q10, which is very popular today. You can get it in any drugstore today. But we were one of the first companies to import it from outside of the country. There'd been a lot of research done at the University of Texas in Austin about its potential health benefits and things. But they didn't like it coming into the country. And so they said that we had used an adulterated food product that we brought into the country. What was that adulterated food product? Rice powder. So we took them to court. And we ended up, of course, you always end up with some kind of a compromise in these kinds of situations. But essentially, we won the case 6 months later. And as a result of this, we became a part of a group of people who advocated for new legislation in the U.S. Congress called the Foods Are Not Drugs Act. I think it was passed in 93 or 94. But prior to that, you could not say that fiber can help with cardiovascular, lower your cholesterol or cardiovascular. You could not say, you could only talk about the macronutrients and that there was nutritional value in them. You could not talk about any kind of impact that any nutritional product had on your body. And as a consequence of that conflict, that new law was passed, which is the law of the land today, where now everywhere you go, they're talking about how these nutritional products. Now, you still can't say they cure something. That's still not allowed. You can
still have a disclaimer on there. That's not a drug. Yes. It's not meant to cure or treat an illness, blah, blah, blah.
But you can now say that they promote cardiovascular health, or they promote digestive health, or they promote brain health. Man, to think back that I got to be some little small part of that change in our national law, it was a cool thing that grew out of getting shut down the third day on the job.
I can't imagine that for the third day on the job, but were you down for the entire 6 months of the court?
It's a complicated story, but actually what they did was they arrested all of our inventory. They put a yellow tape around all our inventory and said that we couldn't ship anything. I think they thought that would break us, that we'd have to close the business. But we were a debt-free business. We had plenty of money in the bank. And 3 days later, we had a new warehouse open shipping the same product that we just reordered. So that product that they arrested was arrested for 6 months. And as a consequence of that, some of it we had to throw away because it used up its shelf life. But we went 3 days without shipping product, and then we were back in business. So that's one challenge. I would say the second challenge for me that was much more difficult. And oftentimes as a leader, you have to deal with challenges where there is no good answer. You have to pick the least of the worst answers, was really what happened during the Great Recession. We had a wonderful team. We had a wonderful business, profitable. We were enjoying working with our clients. And in the fall of 2008, the first client called me and said, "Ron, we need to talk." I said, "Okay, let's get together." We got together and he said, "I've got a choice. I can keep working with you, and I love the stuff that you do, and lay off a bunch of my people. Or I can tell you that I can't fulfill my agreement with you and keep those people." And I said, "Well, it's not a hard choice. You keep your people. We'll figure out a way to survive." And then the next client called, and then the next client called. And between 2008 and 2009, we lost 70% of our business because of the Great Recession. Well, we were not financially robust enough to continue functioning the way we were, losing 70% of our revenue. So we had to make really, really hard decisions. We had to
Mhm.
restructure. We had to change the way that we were providing benefits and things like that for our folks. We had to help some folks get new jobs. It was a very, very hard time. And in the midst of that, we did not know if we were going to survive it. We just worked on surviving one more day. 2010, we picked up some more of our business. 2011, we got closer. I think it was 2012 when we got back to where we were at. Maybe it was 2011 when we got back to where we were at in 2008. And then we had a lot of great years of growth after that. But we came so close to just having to shut the doors because of the trauma of losing that much revenue. And this is a problem you don't want, but you can't change it. You're going to have to accept that this is just a part of the dynamic. So that's a different kind of challenge where you have to make really, really hard decisions that impact people that you care about.
Yeah, no, I can relate to that as far as losing a big chunk of business because of an economic turndown or for whatever the reason, losing a huge, significant portion of the business. And I get where they're coming from too. I mean, I don't want to lay off my people, but at some point when you have to cut, they're like, hey, we'll figure out how to get by without you. And then you're like, well, somehow we'll figure out how to get by without them. But eventually you got to have some customers to keep the doors open.
Yep.
How much runway do you have? It's kind of like Rick always likes to talk about Simon Sinek and talk about his book, The Infinite Game. It's like, how long can you just keep playing the game? Can you, like you said, can you play one more day? Can you just have enough runway for just one more day, one more week? Just how long can I keep playing? As long as I'm playing, I still got a chance to win.
And really, it's your passion about what you do and how you care about the people that you're involved with that keeps you going. And oftentimes, eventually, you find a way out. And you end up being stronger because of it. You learn a lot. I mean, we determined that we were always going to have a rainy day fund coming out of that would give us more flexibility if there was a turndown. When the pandemic hit, we immediately assumed that we were going to lose half of our business. And so we built a plan immediately to get through that because nobody knew what was going to happen. And we did have a huge drop off in our business for about 3 months, and then it started to come back. And by the end of that year, we'd actually matched our revenue from the year before, which to me was a great victory.
That is definitely one of the win column because most people took a beating, and a lot of businesses, especially ones like yours, did not survive.
Yep. We're very, very grateful.
Nice. That's nice. Well, let's get into the next question is, what do you see as being one of the biggest mistakes that leaders make today?
Well, I think it depends on the leader.
Okay.
I'm going to give you two extremes. And of course, most of life is somewhere in the middle. For some leaders, the biggest mistake they make is that they trust their gut too much. And so they make a lot of impulsive decisions. This is what I feel we need to do, so we're going to do this. Now, to their credit, those leaders can pivot very quickly because they keep changing their mind quickly. But there's a tremendous amount of chaos and unpredictability that's created when somebody's making decisions too quickly. Right. The other side of the spectrum is leaders who wait too long to address a problem or to make a decision. One of my co-authors for the book, The Complete Leader, Randy Lisk, said that one of his bosses once told him, because Randy was very much an engineer type and he wanted to have all the data. And his boss told him, Randy, by the time you've got all the data, it's no longer a decision. It's too late. You've got to make decisions before you have all the data. So it's this space in between what is too much and what is not enough in order to make a good decision. And sometimes that's around that you need to feel comfortable that you have all the details that you need. Sometimes it's more of an emotional thing that pushes you one way or the other. The person who has maybe a lower self-regulation, their emotional intelligence is not quite as developed. They may be guilty of impulsive decisions that later they regret, or that they don't realize they lost an opportunity because of doing something too quickly. Right. On the other side of it, you've got some people who are so risk avoidant that they emotionally have a hard time making a decision, or that they hope that if they ignore a problem, it will go away. Well, of course, we know that doesn't happen. Another Randy Lisk, one of his quotes I love. He's got a book called Bumper Sticker Leadership. He said that problems are a lot like dirty socks. They don't get better with age.
I like
So
that.
these
That's
are the
really
two
good.
ends of the spectrum where leaders, and of course, even inside of that, there are different situations as a leader that I face. That one time I may have been too impulsive, too quick. Another time I may have been too slow. But if you're going to summarize it, the biggest mistake I think leaders make is not understanding what is the appropriate leadership decision-making process for the specific set of circumstances that I'm dealing with today. For me, as a senior leader, one of the things I learned years ago that I try to practice all the time is that there are actually 4 different kinds of decision making that I think about making. The first one I call the dictatorial decision. That's where you just say to your team, hear and obey. When our company got shut down 3 days into the job, I didn't have a committee meeting. I had to take action right away. When somebody's life is at risk, when there's some kind of a crisis like that, you have to be a dictatorial leader. You've got to make a quick decision and ask everybody to follow you. But that should be rare and infrequent. The second kind of decision making that I think of is what I call authoritative decision making. And this is around the large decisions that you make for your business around strategy. Where are we going in the future? What are the big financial decisions that we're going to make? And I think the best way to approach these as a leader is I create what I believe is the framework, the context, what I think we should do, why I think we should do it. And then I ask my team to poke holes at it. Go ahead and shoot at it. Tell me why I'm wrong, how I'm wrong. And I let them challenge it and create a safe space where they can do that. And then I come back and say, okay, based on all of the advice you've given me and where we've gone, this is what we're going to do. You know what, Dr. Dave? A lot of times what I end up deciding is different because of the advice they gave me. That's authoritative, and that's usually around strategy and large impact decisions. The third kind of decision making is what I refer to as consultative decision making. This is where you sort of turn the tables. I say to the functional leaders, our operational leaders, I say, here's what I think the issue is. You go figure it out. You go study it. You analyze it. You come back and give me your analysis. Tell me what you think we should do. You get to control the conversation. You get to frame it. You can even tell me if the issue is different than I thought it was. Ultimately, I have to endorse your decision, but really you have more of the power. And usually that kind of decision making works much better for functional leaders and for tactical and operational decisions that are being made. And then the fourth and the final kind of decision making I refer to as participative. This is where we really want to make it more of a consensus with everybody. This is where I think a lot of times you build your culture by giving a certain amount of freedom for people to make decisions. So at TTI, we have something we call our wellness team. It's focused on the employees' well-being, whether mental or physical or emotional. And we give them a budget each year. And we tell them, as long as you stay within this budget, you do whatever you want and just tell us how we can support you. They never get permission. They never get approval. They just run with it because we think they should be able to. So you've got 4 distinct ways of approaching decision making that I think help leaders lead more effectively, because sometimes the big mistake that leaders make is they think they're supposed to be making all the decisions. And that just doesn't work today. Matter of fact, as a senior leader, one of my mantras is, I will be judged not based on the good decisions I make, but I will be judged based on how few bad decisions I make. Because I know I'll make some bad decisions, but I'm hoping it won't be many.
I like that. That's a good turnaround. And you're right. There's a lot of leaders, I think, that really look at, I have to make all the decisions. And no, you have to basically approve of most of them. Like you said, other than, hey, here's your budget, go forth and, make my employees happy. Those are kind of rare. Just as the dictatorial one is kind of rare, depending on the industry. In general business, it's very rare. Your FDA example was a beautiful example on that. I always like to talk to people about, speaking about industry specific, if you look at like the first responder realm, police, fire, EMS. I spent years in the fire department and EMS, and there is a difference. And some of the older school folks had a hard time processing this, and it didn't age really well once you hit the early and mid 90s. But the way you lead on the fire ground is completely different than how
Yes,
you deal with your people at the station. If you don't, like you said, you don't have time to rule by committee when it's like, get out of the house, it's collapsing, right? Or go in there and rescue this kid or whatever the order or the command is, unless there's, oh, I see a safety issue that you don't see, and I'm going to bring that up. It's pretty much they say you do, and everybody goes home tomorrow morning. Versus you don't have that kind of, you don't want to use that kind of decision making when you're running to the grocery store to go get what's for lunch and for dinner.
exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah.
Not quite the same thing.
So I think the worst mistakes that any leader makes are always bad decisions, because the
Yes.
decisions we make have such a rippling effect. They have such a profound impact on the lives of our employees, their families, our customers, their families, our vendors, our community. They have such a big effect that we either really do a great job of leading or a very poor job of leading based on how we approach decision making.
Well, you mentioned something about culture, and I want to kind of get your thoughts on this as we wrap up this segment. You probably could have a leader that says, yes, I'm going to make all the decisions. But when you look at the issue of employee engagement, keeping your people happy, keeping them engaged, especially your leadership team, whether it's frontline supervisor or like department head or anywhere in between, what kind of effect do you think it has on the culture of the organization and the engagement of the employees and the leaders in the organization when the senior leader decides, I'm going to make all the decisions, none of it goes downstream, and they feel like, well, I don't have any input. It doesn't matter what I think. He or she's going to make the decision anyhow. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, keeping in mind that there's probably always going to be an exception. There's some business for which dictatorial leadership all the time works well, but that's not the norm.
No.
I think that there are two big negative consequences of a leader who makes all the decisions. The first and the most important one is that your best people don't stay.
Yep.
The second one is the people who are not going to help you create the future you want do stay. And they become passive. They just wait for instructions. So you are losing most of the value that they could deliver to the company when they learn, because you train them to just wait until you tell them what to do. So I think those are the two big negative consequences that happen. The people you should have leave, the people you shouldn't have stay.
Gotcha. One thing I heard from Marshall Goldsmith that I think was really, really good. He talked about adding too much value. And I did not understand what he was talking about when he kept saying adding too much value. And you probably know exactly where I'm going with this. An employee brings an idea to you and it's maybe 90% where it should be. You're like, oh, that's great, Susan. You could do this, 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 and this. And you might add 5% to the overall value of the thing, but you've blown her motivation by 75%.
Yep. Yep.
Now it's not her idea, it's your idea.
Yeah, you hijacked her idea. Yeah.
Yeah. Now it's your idea, not her idea, where you could settle for the 90% close enough. And now she still has the drive, the engagement, the enthusiasm to just take the ball and run with it.
Yep.
So I never understood that. What do you mean adding too much value? All you hear is people say add value. And then when he explained it like that, I'm like, oh, yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely, like I said, couldn't agree more.
Yeah, Marshall Smith has a lot of great wisdom.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does. Well, we will use that to wrap up this segment of Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave. We will be back in just a moment with our third and final segment. Welcome back to our final segment of Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave with special guest Ron Price, president of TTI Success Insights. So let's jump headlong into our final question and see where that takes us. So what do you think is the best way for leaders to improve their leadership skills?
Oh my goodness, Dr. Dave. Again, so many different ways you could go with this. I think probably the best way I can think of for a leader to keep growing is to get really comfortable with asking for feedback and going out of your way to make feedback easier and easier for people to give you. There's a book called The Extraordinary Leader, Folkman and Zinger, and one of the things they talk about in that book and in their assessment is that everybody knows leaders have weaknesses. They're okay with that. What bothers them is when the leader doesn't realize they have the weakness.
Mm.
And we don't follow leaders because they don't have weaknesses. We follow leaders because they have some particular strength that we think is worth supporting, endorsing. So it could be character strength. It could be that, wow, this is such a great leader, such a great humanitarian, or like a Gandhi or Martin Luther
Right.
King Jr. or somebody like that, that we want to follow them because we identify so much with their values and their character. Or there may be some leaders that we follow because we think their expertise is brilliant. A lot
Okay.
of people probably follow Elon Musk not for his character, but because of his expertise, is the way he thinks, the way he's a futurist, or things like
Right.
that. But we always know that they have weaknesses also, and we're okay as long as they know they have weaknesses. Well, that's why I think feedback is so important. And I think that for a leader to be really good at receiving feedback, we first have to come to grips with the fact that we have never seen ourselves.
Mm.
What do I mean by that? Well, when I get up in the morning, I look at the mirror because I need to shave and I need to comb my hair, but I'm not seeing myself. I'm seeing a reflection of myself. The reality is I have never seen my face. I've only seen a reflection of my face. And that's a metaphor for leadership, that you can't understand or see your leadership if you don't let other people be your mirrors.
Nice.
How do you let them be your mirrors? You make it very easy for them to give you accurate feedback. Now, I don't think it's just anybody, because if you let just anybody give you feedback, you end up in a house of mirrors. You know what that is.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
But it's people that you know care about your success, people who you value their judgment, you believe they exercise good judgment, and you believe that they're going to be candid with you. They're going to care enough to give you the truth.
Okay.
Matter of fact, I don't think humility, which is one of the most important traits for leadership today, I don't think humility is possible without you accepting the feedback from others. Why do I know that? Yeah, I know that because I'm thinking I'm pretty humble, and then somebody gives me some feedback that challenges my self-concept, and something inside me reacts, and I say, I'm not as humble as I thought I was. So I think that's it. So getting good at receiving feedback and then getting good at giving feedback are both equally beneficial for leaders. And this is part of why I love the thing that we do together. We use TTI Success Insights reports because they're a form of feedback. They're first a form, you complete this assessment, which is really capturing your self-concept. And then you work with other people and you say, well, I identify with this, but what do you think? Do you think this is me, or do you? And you create the framework for a conversation, which is much deeper, much more valuable, and much less emotionally driven. It's much more objective by using assessments as a part of that. So I think of the assessments that we use as a bigger expression of that feedback. I think of learning how to be thankful for it, learning how to suspend judgment so that you can listen and ponder and consider. Many times people have given me feedback that in the moment I didn't agree with.
Right.
I wanted to reject, but when I took time to think about it, I suspended my judgment and I pondered it. I could begin to see that they were telling me something that was true that I couldn't see unless I was looking in the mirror, so to speak.
Right.
So
Nice.
I can go on. And I know some people don't like the word feedback, and some people write against feedback. Okay, call it whatever you want. Call it observation. I don't care so much what you call it. What I care about is learning how to give it well and learning how to receive it well.
I would agree with that. And I always ask different people the question. It's funny asking you on, how important is it for a leader to really have that self-awareness, to really, and that's why I'm a fan of the assessment tools, 30, 40 years of hard science behind this. A lot of times I've had people in workshops get mad at me and be like, how do you know this stuff, right? What do you got a camera in my kitchen? What do you tap into my Alexa? I mean, angry. and I do laugh because I know when I first read mine, I was like, dang, that's kind of harsh. And then the more I pondered it, I realized, no, that's probably a lot more true than I really want to admit.
Yeah, well, and the reality is that our assessments, which are built on different psychological models, what I love about what we do is that we've got 5 key sciences that we're looking at. They give a person different views of themselves. but they really do focus more on strengths. They really do, because we believe that everybody's born with natural talent. They're born with something that they can be great at. But every strength has a shadow.
Right.
Every strength has a corresponding weakness. So if I'm really good with people, it means I might not be quite so good with tasks. If I'm really, really good with strategy, it means I might not be so good with the execution of that strategy. And so they all have strengths that have shadows. And teaching people how to be aware of that and then how to moderate it is an important part of what we get from those assessments. But I'm going to say it's that in community, that in relationships that's critical, because we can get all that stuff. I remember the first time I read one of my assessments, I said, oh, I agree with all the positive stuff. I don't agree with that negative stuff. And oftentimes we don't see it. It's a blind spot. You know, I like to say the darndest thing about blind spots is you can't see them. Or another phrase that I've often felt is, gosh, everybody has blind spots but me. Well, I think that's pretty good indication you got blind spots.
Yes.
And we need other people to be our mirrors. We need other people to help us know I actually believe you never achieve full self-awareness without the help of others.
I would agree with that 100%. I have an interesting observation when I do a senior leadership team workshop. And I tell people that a lot of times you'll see some of the, for lack of a better term, I'm not trying to disparage anybody, but maybe some of the less than stellar actors rise to the top, right? Sort of like melting down silver, and you know what's at the top to skim off. And those are typically the ones that absolutely, this is not true, this isn't me, and just throw a fit and, you know, put a kibosh on the whole thing. And most of the time, the hilarious part about it is if you get them to swap an assessment and they get somebody else that they work with all the time to read it, no, dude, this is you to a T. Like, they've got you nailed. I still don't believe it. But go home and give it to your wife, give it to your husband, give it to your partner, right? You know, see what they say. If they say it's BS, and you know, everybody's saying it's true except you. Yes, I had one time that one of the directors or VPs or senior leaders just threw a fit, would not lay off of it. And maybe 3 days after a senior leadership workshop and team debrief, the CEO came back. He's like, man, I hate to ask this, but I'm really sick of hearing her. I said, can you please, can you give it to her again? Like, she's adamant about, she answered the questions wrong. It's just awful. Like, she doesn't agree with it. She's 3 days straight of throwing a fit. For God's sake, what do I got to pay? Can you please give her another assessment? I'm like, got you covered, boss. I'm on it, right? And so I gave her another one. And the funny part is where the time would be, where, you know, maybe it takes 7.5 minutes to do the first one. It took her maybe like 32 minutes to do the second one.
Now she's trying to manipulate the assessment to give the results she wants it to give.
Well, here's the funny thing, and God bless, you know, Dr. Ron and the research team, but I laughed because when I gave them the second assessment, I thought I was going to have to scrape her jaw off the floor. Other than a point here and a point there, and the time being like dramatically increased, it was almost like a mirrored copy of them. I mean, the research department would have gone bananas over the validity and reliability on how close it was to the original one. And I guess she was like, "Oh, dang! I guess I got a lot of self-reflection and work to do at this point." I'm like, "Yes, ma'am, I think you do." The test retest on that one was amazing, Ron.
Yep. I've had the same experience myself. You know, moving on from feedback and self-awareness, that really helps you to understand where you can grow and where you have strengths. Then I think your question is, how do you develop skills as a leader?
Right.
I think you can segment skills into different kinds of skills. And I think that this is helpful. For instance, you have your thinking skills. That might be the way that you make decisions, the way you solve problems, might be the way you think about the future, or your creativity. These are all things that are thinking skills. And those skills are really important, especially as you take on more and more responsibility as a leader. Then you have achieving skills. So achieving skills are, how good are you at getting across the finish line with your goals? How well do you manage your time and your priorities? How well do you manage your emotions? Do you take responsibility for things? And are you flexible? Are you resilient? These are all achieving skills, and these are important right from your first job, but they carry right on throughout your whole career. And then the third bucket of skills I think of are relationship skills. So, how well do you connect with other people? Do you understand them for who they really are? How well can you develop and coach them? How do you work through conflict? How do you work as part of a team? How do you manage negotiations, or how do you influence people in a positive way? How do you build those relations? These are all examples of relationship skills. So every leader has to develop some skills in each of these three buckets. And those are things that you can very practically and systematically develop. You first define what the skill is. And this is one, you know, that our competency assessment does this. You define what the skill is. Then you ask yourself, what kind of behaviors would I need to practice to get better at this skill? If I want to become a better server in tennis, I can't do it by watching videos. I have to get out there and hit lots and lots and lots of tennis balls. And I probably need somebody observing me and helping me understand what I'm doing right or what I'm doing wrong.
100%.
And if you practice it long enough, you get a little better, a little better, a little better. And it's someday you look back and you say, wow, I've created a new skill, or I've advanced that skill significantly. And I think if you really keep at it, more and more it becomes second nature to you. It becomes a reflex skill instead of a conscious skill that you're practicing. So to me, this is the wonderful thing about the leadership journey, is that you're never done. You can always work on improving your thinking skills, your achieving skills, your relating skills. That's, I think, a big part of why I'm still not retired yet.
I love those three buckets. And I was just thinking, as a person who's a team leader, you would be very hard. It would be very difficult to really knock it out of the park with the achieving skills, or have your team achieve stuff, if you were not really good at the personal skills.
Yeah, that's right.
That would be very difficult. But it's funny, you talked about practicing the skills and hitting the balls. The first thing that came to my mind as you were going down that road for the analogy was Toastmasters.
Yeah, it's what a wonderful place for people to develop their speaking skills. Fantastic.
Yeah, speaking, presentation, kind of speaking on the fly, leadership, a lot of different skills that people don't understand.
Skills, yeah.
Yes. Yep. Yes, there's a lot of, like I said, the achieving, because you're working down a path to try to achieve a certain goal. Like I said, leadership skills, taking leadership roles in the organization. It's funny, you don't, but the thing that got me about what you said is that I've seen folks in Toastmasters, and myself included, you start at a certain level and they just keep doing it. They keep giving speeches, they keep doing evaluations, they keep picking up roles in the meetings. And then all of a sudden, 6 to 12 months or 18 months later, they don't even realize how good they've gotten, how much they've grown. And then somebody's come back and say, you couldn't have done that 6 months ago. There's no way you could have done that a year ago. And to see that change, one, is just awesome. I love it myself to see people develop it. And they don't even realize it. It's just completely oblivious to them because it is so incremental.
Yep. That's a wonderful thing to see. Gotcha. And it shows us how important repetition is, and learning in community, because learning in community, you help each other, you support each other, and you recognize each other's growth.
Yes. And I give the folks that show up to our Toastmasters Club a hard time. I said, well, yes, to a certain degree, you get more comfortable with speaking as you do it, but you could speak. John Maxwell talks about experience isn't the best teacher. Evaluated experience is the best teacher. The joke I kind of poke at them with a little bit to get them riled up, I said, you can speak at every Kiwanis club, every Rotary club, every Ruijten club, every Chamber of Commerce known to man, right, in your region. And everyone at the end of your talk, they're going to just start clapping and being all happy. And you're thinking, man, I am good at this. I am the man. I have got this public speaking thing down. Probably not, because there's two reasons why they're probably clapping for you. Now, you may be good. I'm not trying to disparage anybody, but it's two main reasons they're probably clapping. One, because you were probably up there like Charlie Brown's teacher, like wah, 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 and they're just so happy it's over. They would clap just for anything. There's like, thank God it's over. And the second part is they're clapping and they're giving you a standing ovation. Like, I am so glad I didn't have to be the one to stand in front of 100 people and do a horrible job like that. And so those two reasons don't help you get better. It just feeds the ego, like, oh, they clapped, they liked it, I did a great job.
Well,
not like what you thought.
A lot of kudos for trying. You don't get better.
Yes, and it does eliminate the butterflies from the stomach just from experience and repetition, but you don't get that, like I said, learning in community, as you mentioned. That's a big deal.
Yep.
So with that, let's wrap it up. Tell our listeners how they can connect with you, connect with TTI, books you might have, websites, connect on LinkedIn. How can they like tap into all the Ron Price goodness?
Well, first, Dave, I would say that we are so appreciative for people like you who represent us in the marketplace. We refer to you as partners, and we really can't do much of anything without folks like you who are helping. So actually, my first encouragement would be for them to reach out to you. But if they want to reach out to me, they can get me at ron.price@ttiltd.com. That's my email address, ron.price@ttiltd.com. I'd love for them to follow me on LinkedIn. I'm at Ron Price 89 is my LinkedIn address, Ron Price 89.
Okay.
And then they could go to our website by going to ttisuccessinsights.com and find out more about us.
Gotcha. And you mentioned you had a book with Lisk.
Yeah, I've been so fortunate to be able to work with a lot of great authors and co-publish. If the people are only going to read one of my books, I would recommend that they get Growing Influence, a story of how to lead with character, expertise, and impact. It has some of the ideas that we've talked about today, and it's actually a novella, a short fictional story about an older man who's mentoring a young woman who is in a management position in the technology industry, and they develop a very close relationship. They learn from each other. And in the process, I was able to share some of the most important things that I've learned through my career that I wanted to share with other people and to put it into a story that has some heartstrings to it as well. So that would be the first one. They can find out about my other books by going to Amazon.com.
What was the name of that one again?
Growing Influence by Ron Price and Stacey Ennis. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. I would encourage everybody to go on Amazon and get that. Connect with Ron on LinkedIn. Check out some of the tools that TTI Success Insights have. And with that, thank you so much, Ron, for being on the podcast today. And hopefully we will talk soon. Take care.
Thank you.